One of the things that I did want to pick up, we talked briefly about the problem of obviously election hoax and putting thumbs on scales. Do you guys have any thoughts on what's going on in Ecuador right now?
Do we?
Also,
let's take this. Okay, yeah.
You go.
Oh goodness, yeah.
There's no good English coverage on this. I'm excited that you guys can read in Spanish because I'm looking for a wave of information here.
So, oh goodness. So the first thing I would definitely recommend to people is to listen to the most recent Machete Y Mate interview that we did with a journalist in Ecuador, as well as one of the actual election observers that was there in Quito for this election. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. And we just did an analysis that we literally dropped this morning. So that's a good one as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, goodness. So let me try and recap, I guess, our thoughts, my thoughts. I'll allow. Oh, okay. Nice. I like what's happening on the screen right now. You see, this is a professional podcast. We have a clown show on ours. So we're learning shit as we see you guys do that.
But we keep it real. We keep it real Latin American. Like try to, cut our costs and shit. So
yeah, exactly. Check it out. You already know. So anyway, so in Ecuador, oh shit. Okay. So it's very I think the number one thing to think about what's going on in Ecuador, it's very nuanced, right? It's not black and white. It's not black and white. To me, what seems very clear is that the right wing in Latin America is coalescing together to complete what I would describe, and once again, Leroy or T, you can chime in with how you would look at it, but with what I would describe as a political hit job against Andrés Arauz and the Union for Hope, and more broadly the Correístas, or the 21st century socialists, people may refer to them as. I think that, I look back to the super secret meeting, right, that the head of the OAS, Luis Almagro, held with the soon-to-be former president of Ecuador.
Whenever I hear the name the OAS, I'm like, where is this coup happening?
Oh yeah, that's just send chills down your spine. If you know the OAS is involved, I go back to what Fidel Castro called them, the Department of the Colonies, right? It's the U.S. Department of Colonies. That's what the OAS is. So if they're involved, the bullshit's going down. So with Ecuador, Andrés Arauz, the Union for Hope candidate, he was the faraway vote getter, right? There was a bit of confusion about who came in second place. And I'd say that's where a lot of the kind of fuckery started developing. There was a conflict between Yaku Pérez of the Patria Grande party, which is an indigenous party, and Guillermo Lasso, who's the neoliberal banker candidate. Right.
I heard that the indigenous guy may have American funding. I read that in English, though. So I don't know.
Oh yeah, buddy. Let me. Yeah. and here's why this is
hold your horses.
Yeah. Here's why Here's why this is a complicated issue. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the history of Patria Grande and the indigenous organizations within Ecuador, because it's really important. So CONAE, which is the Confederation of Indigenous Organizations in Ecuador, is one of the most militant and well-organized indigenous organizations in South America, right? They have a reputation for being very well organized. They were formed in the 80s, right? Their big moment of initial prominence was, I want to say, 1991, when they had their what they called their indigenous uprising against kind of the rising neoliberalism or rising neoliberal policies that were really taking effect in the region during the early 90s and the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, or however the fuck we want to phrase that. And CONAE, very similarly to how the indigenous movements in Bolivia did, formed a political party in 1995. This political party was Patria Grande, right? This is the indigenous political party. It came out of the militantly socialist, plurinationalist indigenous movements. So that's important context when we're talking to think about when we're talking about Patria Grande and CONAE, in my opinion, right? So Yaku Pérez is the candidate that was nominated by Patria Grande to run for president. For me, and once again, Leroy and T, feel free to say something else if you want. But for me, Yaku Pérez is a clear opportunist. Yaku Pérez is a bad actor. Yaku Pérez never saw a right-wing coup he didn't like. Yaku Pérez never saw a left-wing government that he didn't want to call corrupt, right? No. And for that, I think it's the worst thing that the Ecuadorian left could be doing right now is feeding those divisions, right? Is trying to make this some weird Patria Grande versus the Correístas sort of thing. I think Andrés Arauz, who, once again, he was the top vote getter. He's the 21st century socialist candidate. I think his rhetoric throughout all of this has been spot on, which is that he has emphasized the common ground between the Union for Hope and Patria Grande. There's a really good English language Democracy Now! Interview that Andrés Arauz did this week that I strongly recommend.
Yeah, I actually watched that.
Out. Exactly. Yeah. He is so charismatic and he speaks better English than I do. Like,
it was great. Yeah. And he was they talked about Korea as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All that. It's a really good interview. And he emphasized, he said, I think we should, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, I think we should be celebrating that the Ecuadorian people have voted 70% in favor of plurinationalism, 70% against neoliberalism, right? And I think that's the rhetoric that people should be approaching, right? We shouldn't be feeding into this narrative of Patria Grande versus UNES versus the Union for Hope, because they can coexist. They are natural allies, right? They're natural allies. Evo Morales, once again, who obviously Bolivia, Bolivia, Evo campaigned with Arauz, right? And I think Leroy's got something to say, so I'll yield to you, Leroy. I've said enough.
No, 100%. And just to piggyback off of that, one thing that Arauz did masterfully is linking those struggles, understanding it's, plurinationalism against neoliberalism, against imperialism, against the global north that's coming to fuck our societies up, right? And one thing that we see as well is that CONAE, being the militant and principled group that they are, when the meetings were happening behind the scenes between Lasso, who's that neoliberal banker candidate, and Yaku Pérez, Isa, so who's the representative of the more like militant sort of labor indigenous side, not necessarily like the electoral side, came out and said there wouldn't be, this isn't a paraphrasing again, we're not showing that this isn't a situation where we're in agreement, because if we're in agreement, our militants would be in the streets. So basically disavowing any notion that they're on board with that meeting, which was, again, I think is important because they do need to keep that separate. And that, again, reinforces the idea that Yaku Pérez is an opportunist. And again, something else I want to make clear, I'll make clear on the episode as well. We can call Yaku Pérez an opportunist. We can talk about that he's given up the game and everything. But to bring in any idea of, any notion of his indigeneity into question, bring anything like that, bringing in racism into this is disgusting, because we're seeing that as well. We're seeing supposed leftists coming out because, oh, he's a leftist, oh, he's not even indigenous, oh, he's a traitor, blah 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 blah. Let's not do that, because racism in any form is fucking disgusting, right? But that's just my 2 cents on what Austin was saying. So Austin, if you want to pick it back up.
No, you're good. If there's any final point that I would want to drive home on this, it's what our homie from the Progressive International, who was an election observer down there, said, which is we need to be extraordinarily clear. There were no signs of fraud, right? Fundamentally, Yaku Pérez has been talking about, oh my God, there was fraud. According to all the election observers, there were no signs of fraud.
Wow, right? That sounds really funny. I wonder if I've heard somebody else use that line before after an election.
Yeah, sounds familiar, right? Yeah.
But Austin, like
I
you said,
remember where I read that. When I'm fucking
like you said, Austin, there's voter suppression, but there wasn't voter fraud. Clear difference.
Yeah, and the reason it sounds familiar is because the United States, just like Ecuador and Bolivia, is an American country.
Mm-hmm.